Hi pals, it's me, Artie, they them pronouns only, and welcome back here. Also, I've had to move some things around. We had a heat wave, we're probably gonna have more heat waves, so I'm having to prepare for extreme heat. So if you can hear that noise, it's the mini fridge I pulled out of storage the other day, so I can store cold drinks, cold water and ice packs, because I'm chronically ill. And honestly, it's been great already, but it is a bit noisy, I've just realised. So my video today, okay, I wasn't going to do this, but I wasn't feeling like super excited for the other ideas I have. So this one's probably going to be a long one. I'm talking about skins, but specifically Generation 2 and the canon and non-canon autistic coded characters. For anybody who maybe doesn't know what Skins is, it was kind of a groundbreaking teen drama in the UK. It, I think, started airing in the mid 2000s-ish. Peak fashion. It was a show that portrayed a more realistic version of teenagers in the UK, I guess. A lot of getting drunk in fields, taking drugs, a lot about mental health, a lot about queerness, bodies, the general weirdness of being a teenager. But of course it's one of those shows as well that does romanticize a lot of things and comedy-ifies everything as well. Like, there are some things that maybe shouldn't have been that funny. It was also a very white show, a very like skinny show, and not super representative of disabled or trans people, and there wasn't a lot of queerness. For me as well, this particular generation was my first exposure to gay women. gay teenage girls. So yeah, in a lot of ways it was very revolutionary for a lot of teenagers, but also, especially since the show's been like long over, there has also been a lot of conversation about production, how these actors were treated, because that was the other thing. Majority of the cast of these seasons were close to age of the characters, so around 16 to 20-ish. Yeah, a lot of bad practice when it came to how the production handled that. But I'm sure a lot of those things have been talked about a bunch. I personally haven't seen the autistic stuff, so I want to talk about it. Can't remember when I sat and rewatched the seasons to make my notes, but it was a while ago, so I'm going to go through my notes. But I want to specify the two characters I'll be talking about mainly are Pandora, my headcanon autistic, and JJ, who is autistic in the show. My notes are just episode by episode, so I'm just gonna like vibe through. Yeah, most of my notes seem to be on season 3. So I'm going to talk about our first sort of introduction to Pandora, which was actually in Generation 1, season 2, episode 7. She's introduced as someone who is assigned to Effie, I guess, at her new school. The introduction for Pandora is like very innocent. We see her chewing the lid of her pen and absolutely covered in ink, and it's delivered to us that she needs mentoring or guidance. She has this phrase that she uses quite a lot throughout these seasons, where she says, "I'm useless," and that's sort of how she introduces herself as well, is like, "I'm useless, that's why I'm here," which is in this particular private school. I don't know. She's also shown to do a lot of things to win respect and love from other people, but especially Effie in particular. Literally in this episode, she's doing some weird tricks in the tree that ends with her hanging from a noose by her foot, and I think her pants are on display, I can't remember. Oh, and her bra's in her hand, like, which just feels so autistic. Doing the most to make friends. And her comment is just, "Mum sent me to circus school." I also personally feel attacked by that, because I I did learn clowning and circus tricks. I learned to still walk. So yeah. Then Effie takes Pandora home. Pandora sees all the drama that is going on in Effie's house, but doesn't judge her. Very autistic. A lot of the characters in Skins are very judgmental. So that's why I say this feels very autistic, is because, yeah, the two least judgmental characters are either canon or headcanon autistic. But yeah, Effie's mum's gone a bit mad from stress. Tony, Sid and Michelle are having their drama at the end of, like, because it's their generation at that point in time. Tony is disabled. He was hit by, was it a truck? A bus? He was hit by something. So basically I think he had brain damage and had to relearn pretty much everything and had to be cared for by his mum and his sister. I think his dad's fucked off. Again, things that I appreciate about the show, even though it probably wasn't the best depiction at times, it was a depiction where there wasn't really representation of that kind on TV, in popular media. And just Pandora's comments are, is she mental about her mum? And then, your brother's really nice. Not realising that maybe that would be insulting to some people, and just asking to know. Effie then dresses Pandora up to go clubbing, and like the juxtaposition between Effie and Pandora is very bizarre, but also I think done on purpose. Effie looks very adultified and could possibly pass as an adult or at least an older teenager, whereas Pandora just kind of looks like a messy child playing dress up in her mum's going out clothes, although Pandora's mum in particular definitely would not have going out clothes like this. Pandora's mum rings her, and that's when Pandora is telling her mum about her new friend Effie. I've got a friend. No, not like the last one. No, not from the internet. Always very enthusiastic, telling her mum about things. Whilst Effie just always looks and acts annoyed. Which is just... that is a truly peak autistic experience where you're really enthusiastic about a thing and then your neurotypical friends are like, shut the fuck up, you're cringe and not cool. Yeah, like I said, she's very naive and innocent. She tells her mum that they're going to pick up, and her mum wants to know what they're going to pick up. Effie said drugs, and Pandora's like, salad. Because she's not a liar. She's not a seasoned or practiced liar. Pandora sees Cassie kissing a girl. And she calls it like their man and woman kissing, and looks so like absolutely shocked and like had no idea that gay people exist. And then she also offers to pay for the drugs that Effie's picking up, which is also like a really common thing. It's definitely a very talked about kind of friend abuse. Is a lot of autistic people have experienced financial abuse in that sort of way, where they feel like the only way that anyone's going to like them is if they pay for things. And I feel like the slang in Skins generally is very British and very Bristolian, but Pandora's slang is so unique that it really makes her stick out. Effie gets Pandora high. Pandora answers the phone to her mum and gets herself in trouble by answering that what she's doing is staring at Tony's cock. At the club, she's sucking a lolly the bouncer gave her and doing embarrassing dancing as everyone stops to stare at her because she's like ruining the vibe. Yeah, there's so many different visual cues for her being a child, mentally, physically, emotionally, and they are children. Like, I think at that point in time they're probably around 15, maybe 16, because they're a bit younger than the current main generation's cast. But also like that dancing scene where she's just like absolutely going for it whilst everyone else is staring at her. She doesn't give a fuck. Not a care in the world. And like literally this whole introduction to Pandora and Effie is like just a continuing pattern, but like also a motif for like the TV show, is that Pandora always goes along and supports, in particular Effie, but anyone who she's friends with, and she is never supported or protected in return. So yeah, Pandora isn't looked after or looked out for by Effie during this whole thing. Effie gets annoyed with Pandora for wanting to try a drug when she's already on something else. She isn't a drug user. I'm pretty sure she says that she's not taken drugs. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She doesn't know any of the slang when it comes to drugs. Me. You know, and they're also like out in public. They're not somewhere safe. A lot of the advice a lot of people, like responsible people, will give you that if you are interested in taking any drugs or anything that may alter your state of mind, the best place to start is in a safe place, usually your house or a friend's house, with safe people around you who will look after you or are experienced, etc, etc. So like, it's the complete opposite of what you should be doing anyway, but also usually a lot of autistic people are especially sensitive to substances. So her reactions to the drugs are different to everybody else's because she's autistic. Nobody else acts like that. And then when we get to season 3, when it's them as like the starring generation, JJ doesn't actually take drugs because he's autistic and on a lot of other like prescribed medication. So we don't really see the canon comparison. Yeah, there's a moment when they go to the toilet as well in this club, and Pandora asks if Effie has loo roll, and Effie just lies and says she doesn't when she does. And it's just all of those really small moments like that when the friend of an autistic person is just being mean and cruel in every conceivable way, even in the smallest ways, like, is there toilet roll? My undiagnosed autistic teenage self had absolutely a fucked up perception of all this, and that's where a lot of the framing of this show ruins some of these characters, because I wanted to be Effie, of course, and Pandora really frustrated me. And as an adult, you know, like half of my age right now was 14, which is probably when I started watching this show, if not maybe a bit younger. My 14-year-old self definitely had a lot of internalized misogyny and ableism, and I am pretty sure that's why I didn't like Pandora as a teenager, especially because I could see a lot of myself in Pandora and her actions and how other people treated her. Ooh. And if anything, rewatching this series and seeing it from a different point of view and actually being able to empathise with Pandora and JJ was actually a little bit healing in ways. And yeah, back to this little toilet scene as well. Pandora says, I've seen it in the movies, girls pee together on nights out, and that's just such an iconic, like, I don't know what real friends do because I don't have any, and everything I've learned about friendship is based off of TV shows. Do you think me watching Skins is why I had lots of really shitty friends? Because that was normal. That was normal to me. Right, good thing I've got therapy tomorrow. But yeah, like generally every time in this show that Pandora gets genuinely absolutely fucked up on drugs, nobody's ever concerned, and they're all just annoyed, or some of them are entertained. So moving on to like the actual Generation 2 seasons, Pandora is made to study beauty at college because that's what her mum wants her to do, even though she would like to do something else. Particularly, she wants to study philosophy. And she refers to sex by all sorts of like euphemisms. Surf and turf is like the main one that she uses. She's very upfront with compliments, particularly to boys, and it always seems to put them off. And JJ and Pandora are very similar in how they act and how they are treated. There is a lot of mirroring between what happens with Pandora and Effie and what happens with JJ, and it kind of depends. I would say Cook and Freddie have their own times being the worst friends to JJ for their own variety of reasons. And Pandora just leaves her beauty class and goes straight to, I think, psychology, and just goes, can I join this class? I don't like mine. And the guy's just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she goes, whizzer. Whizzer. I am not good at a Bristolian Somerset accent without it sounding bad. But she goes whizzer, and I'm like, whizzer is another one of her like regular iconic pieces of slang she uses. In episode 2, Pandora pukes on the table at Cook's birthday, and I think that was at a pub as well, because she just witnessed him swallowing a goldfish whole. And all the girls react to Pandora like, what is wrong with you? And I'm just like, what do you mean? What is wrong with Pandora? What is wrong with Cook? He just swallowed a fish. And you're just unfazed until a girl has a physical response to witnessing that. But yeah, she's kind of always a follower in the worst ways. She gets into the worst situations. So does JJ, because they are followers. And I feel like JJ has more of an ability to be like, oh, I don't know if we should do this. This is a bad idea. He's just not listened to, whereas Pandora doesn't feel able to even say things like that, or maybe doesn't even have the life experience, because like with JJ, Cook and Freddie, they've been a friendship group for like years, and they protect JJ from other people being ableist towards him, but are also just ableist to him. So he has a lot of learned experience being friends with them, versus Pandora not really having a solid friend or friendship group until Effie. So yeah, whenever people do drugs, she kind of just follows along. She still clearly doesn't know how to do drugs, and is very innocent and excitable about taking drugs, which is not cool. But yeah, she will make declarations like, I've decided I love drugs. And like this one, I can't remember what drug it was, whether it was MDMA or cocaine, but she eats it. She just gets a little baggie and whilst everyone is looking at her and mocking her while she's eating it, she's like, what, was that wrong? And like, I feel like one of our only moments where Pandora really has any agency is when Cook propositions her and calls her weird girl, and her reply is, you're beautiful, but no. That's why she's really fucked up on drugs too, so respect. And then Effie calls her Amy Winehouse and takes her home. In this season, Pandora has a boyfriend, or she gets a boyfriend. She meets him at the bus stop, which feels extremely typical of an autistic person / character. He was eating donuts and offered them donuts, and she ate the donuts. And she talks whilst eating, drinks loads of iron brew, smokes a load of spliff, and then pukes again. Like, this will be like a regular thing too, is that she is shown to not either care or understand the social conventions of like manners around like eating and drinking and taking drugs, and it's just kind of portrayed in a way that's like, wow, she is stupid and disgusting. This is someone to laugh at, not laugh with. It is always laughing at her. That was the thing. I felt so attacked by this character. She takes drama and or like dance. It was like a she kind of, couldn't remember if she takes both or like some weird combination where she has to be an African animal. That was at the college. Thomas is the guy she met at the bus stop who becomes her boyfriend. He is working at the college, I think at the time, as like a janitor, and sees this awful group of white students dressed as African animals and dancing to African music. So she notices him there and asks him why he's crying, and then she takes him to her like auntie's house for tea and cake, where it turns out the tea is weed tea. And she just has no idea. She has no idea that it's weed tea. And like, I don't know what this note means. But like later she is in her underwear on Thomas's bed. They go to sleep. I don't know whether they are going to sleep or going to sleep together. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And Thomas's mum turns up, so Pandora has to leave. I feel like she doesn't realise the mum was there, so she's taken off her bra to try and seduce Thomas, talking about how great her boobs are, and then her mum's there and she has to go, you know? We finally get an actual episode dedicated to Pandora herself as episode 4. She's waking up at Effie's house holding Thomas's necklace because he gave her his necklace to remember her by. And Pandora says, "She's beautiful, not like me," about Effie. That's just sad, but such a mood. I think Effie says something about, somebody says love is a big word, and Pandora just goes, I don't know, it's 4 letters, and peak autism. She then regurgitates information about the Congo, which is where Thomas is from. I think where Thomas has been sent back to for a while. Yeah, that's where he is at this moment in time. So it's become a special interest because Thomas is a special interest of hers, which is very autistic. She also has begun leaning into her own like fashion choices. She definitely dresses in like a maximalist, dopamine seeking, sensory seeking, autistic way. She's got a very childish style, especially when you compare her to the other girls of the series. And you know, like actually Pandora in at least this particular season is what's been quite popular recently, again, is like, sort of like a Y2K fashion. Pandora, there's lots of moments where she's talking like 100 miles a minute at breakfast in particular, and she's getting good at regurgitating lies to her mother to cover herself, almost like she's scripting. Effie just fucks off and is like, "Why are we friends?" And Pandora, being Pandora, is like, "You're the coolest person ever and I'll do anything for you. I'll do anything you want me to. And the boys don't want to surf and turf me because I'm useless." Okay, and we're getting to her like birthday sleepover too. She's having a sleepover with the girls and it's like a pajama party. Her and her mum made pajamas for everybody coming and it's a no drugs party. Katie has like a weird pedo boyfriend, keeps hitting on Effie, and Pandora says hi and he just goes, okay. Because he's one of the very over-the-top stereotyped Somerset Bristolian sort of sounding character. Pretty much all the others don't really get that the party is drug-free and thinks it's boring, but Pandora just wants to play Twister. Her mum literally calls her overstimulated. Like, you know what I mean when because this season literally had a canon diagnosed autistic teenage boy in this season, you can see why I'm struggling to ever agree that Pandora maybe just wasn't autistic, because like they are just laying it out there. If you know what autism is like, Pandora is autistic. Pandora also then gets really upset when she finds out that the others spiked the brownies and pretty much spiked that, like, her mum, because her mum ate the brownies and then she's absolutely fucked up. She then locks herself in the bathroom after shouting at Effie for being self-absorbed and never thinking about Pandora. Yes. You deserve better, babe. You deserve better, babe. Fuck Effie. Yeah, so I would also then perceive her locking herself away as either a shutdown or a meltdown. There's also a moment where Freddie is angry at Effie for not giving a shit about JJ having gotten overstimulated at this party and almost having a meltdown of his own. It's almost as if controlled environments are the preference for autistic people. You know, I feel like Pandora getting really upset as well about the change in plan. It wasn't a planned thing. It wasn't something they were going to do on the sly. No, it was what other people forced upon her. And then also Freddie actually has a go at Effie for how badly she's treated Pandora as well. The one time Freddie isn't also a shithead. Pandora comes out of the toilet when pretty much everyone is gone or has crashed. The only person awake still is Cook, and he's thieving, pretty much. He's pickpocketing everybody. And she just says that she wanted to play Twister and have her friends teach her about sex. So Cook plays Twister and is actually nice to her and then teaches her about sex. And I mean they have sex. And this was something in particular that I didn't really get as a teenager, because obviously Pandora is in love with Thomas, and Cook, she's already turned him down before. When she was absolutely fucked up, and this time she's not on anything and doesn't turn him down. Cook is my My notes say Cook is a slag of a dude. And Pandora is easily manipulated, especially when she felt so down and lonely, and the only person being nice to her was Cook. Or at least being nice to her face. Effie catches them. Which you think wouldn't be much of a big deal, because Effie's not interested in Cook, so it's fine, right? Nope, that's just the tism. She gets really pissed. Pandora stands up for herself. I'm not worth this just because I'm useless. He will never be yours. He will never be anyone's, but that's why you don't want him. He's not the one you want. I know that because I'm your friend and I know all about your family. You know nothing about my mum. Why don't you know anything about my mum? Why don't you know anything about my mum? And then Thomas actually came back to England, and then she feels really guilty and doesn't know what to do, and probably thought he would never be back at all, let alone so soon. The next bit is that we have JJ's solo episode next. We're introduced to him after he's had a meltdown. In a lot of ways, I'm glad that they didn't really show too much explicit moments or scenes about meltdowns, because the amount of non-autistic actors doing these things is just a little bit embarrassing and cringe. So as far as I know, the actor who plays JJ is not autistic. I think he did a relatively great job of portraying an autistic guy, but also the representation of autism in men and in his character in this show is kind of stereotypical. But as I've said a million times before, stereotypes doesn't necessarily mean it isn't true or accurate. It just means it's the most represented experience. So yeah, we see him after he's had a meltdown. His room is a state. A lot of his experience as well, this character JJ, a lot of things he calls things something different to the autistic terminology. So this is a rage incident. He uses things like locked on for, I think, hyperfixating, and a few other things like that. So this is what he and his family and friends call a rage incident. I think sometimes as well, stepping away from the pathologizing? Pathologification? I'm not sure, but stepping away from pathologizing of descriptive words is actually probably a good thing, because saying things like special interest or meltdown, etc., especially in current internet world, is that these words and phrases tend to be co-opted. A really big one I see co-opted is mainly an OCD trait. I can't think what the specific wording is for it, but thoughts, where people are using this term to describe their impulsive thoughts and actions, when that's not what that terminology even means. I feel like using things like rage incident and locked on can be a easier to understand colloquialism for especially kids, because he was diagnosed as a kid, and obviously this show is or was for a teen audience, so calling it a rage incident versus a meltdown kind of levels it out to be a bit more relatable for the audience, even though meltdowns aren't necessarily rage or rage induced. And he basically just plods along in a much more leveled out state to go and buy some more model planes. Now I said stereotypical, I meant stereotypical. He has to replace one that he broke, and the shopkeeper asks if he is still taking his meds, and maybe they aren't working anymore. Although there aren't meds. There's not really meds for autism. I know a lot of autistic people who are on meds for certain symptoms linked to their autism, but it's not like ADHD has stimulants. He then goes to the doctor. The doctor weighs him, and the doctor says, "You don't have to worry about that." And JJ says, "Well, it seems like I need to." Doctor says, "You know what we say about worrying, JJ?" And JJ says, "Just don't." And the doctor nods. And If that whole thing, if that whole thing is not a, like, oh my god. One, as a chronically ill person, before I even knew I was autistic, going to the doctors, having to be weighed for like God knows what reason, and being told not to worry about it, and being told, you know, to just not worry. But also I really like that moment of like, well, it seems like I need to worry about it because you weigh me every time I'm here. Just a really nice little subtle moment of autism. He discloses that his friends are arguing and how they hate each other, but the doctor just says, I'm sure they don't hate you. And JJ says, didn't say that. I said they hate each other. And then the doctor goes, getting locked on, and just gives him more meds and sends him off on his way. And he goes, I want to be normal. And the doctor goes, yeah, so take those. I think these were really good scenes because it's literally so accurate, to be honest. I know it's in a parody sort of way, but genuinely, these moments happen exactly like that scene happened. You know, he just wants to talk through his problems, but the doctor brushes him off and tells him not to worry. And JJ has a meltdown in the waiting room because of how fucking nonsensical that whole time just was. Such a mood. Autistic king, big mood. And then like he bumps into Emily, our lesbian of the group, not out yet, but yeah. And JG says, you know, normal people don't come here. And Emily is also just given pills for whatever she's got going on. And it turns out that they've both been put on the same pills, and they don't have the same thing. And this is just like so spot on. And I don't think I really understood how spot on this was as a teenager, and I can only appreciate it as an adult who is constantly going through these kinds of scenes. They don't feel real. You feel like you're in a sitcom. You're like, hello? But yeah, he does use a lot of terminology still that is linked to autism and ADHD. He's talking about, you know, getting overstimulated just by talking to Emily about things. My notes are so strange. So he obviously shows Emily all of his meds, like all of these other pills he's on, which is a mood. But my note just says, then nearly kills her, laughing my ass off, question mark, question mark, question mark. I do not remember what that is meant to be. Something gross. And she just says, you're nice, JJ. And he says, I'm unusual. And like, that's the cis white man autism version of I'm just useless for the woman autistic. He says that's code for weird, and then he calls himself a bunch of ableist slurs, which is a super fun thing about this show. There's loads of ableist slurs going on, especially the R one, the R slur. I love that. But you know, that was. I had a conversation recently with people about how that particular slur was just like all the rage when I was in secondary school. So yeah, this show really is a product of its time. But yeah, so he calls himself a bunch of ableist slurs when he gets upset with himself. And, you know, instead of having any kind of support from like a disability justice point of view, which would help deal with the internalized ableism, because for me, working out I'm autistic helped me accept and not beat myself up all the time for those things and moments. Whereas this fucking kid who's like, you know, 16, 17 is still being so mean to himself because he's autistic. He knows he's autistic and he knows that's why, but like all he wants is to change it. It's just, yeah, it's sad, but it's like very accurate. And then something I noticed watching the show is that when JJ gets locked on, most people hit him to like literally knock him out of being locked on. And I think she kissed him. Emily didn't hit him, but I think she kissed him or something, I don't know. But she is the only person who did not physically assault him to try and stop him from going down this spiral. Again, more notes, I don't really know what the fuck they are. There's a really small scene when he gets home and goes up to his room. He sees his mum asleep on the couch. I think he like puts a blanket on her maybe, doesn't wake her up, and she's surrounded by his like autism documents. And it's just like, wow, mood, me and my mum. especially when it comes to Pip. And he basically decides he wants to come off all of the pills that he's on, which is fair and valid. I totally get that. He's on a bunch of pills for like basically no reason. But he throws them out. And as he does that, Cook calls him, and then there's just, like, considering he is kind of like still portrayed as cis straight, and God, is it allosexual? When he is asked if he's gay, which I think is really interesting as well. I know a lot of autistic people are queer or trans or both, and a lot of people who aren't but are autistic are still thought to be gay or trans. So he was asked if he was gay, and his response was, "I'm not gay, I'm not anything." And that was just the mood. I just really like the mood. I'm not anything mood. And he has rituals like drinking mango juice when he's stressed, and it's that brain indicator to calm down. A huge part of routines for autistic people is reminding them, like, basically to function. I think I've said on here when I was talking about the things I was excited about last autumn about autumn is that I love watching autumn reality TV because it tells my brain it's autumn and that's the time of year it is, and we're leading up to Christmas. And he says, "I can't go off the rails. My mum, she needs me to be okay," which is such a mood, but also so sad. He's so honest with Effie at one point where he tells her that she's mucking up all of his friendships. Cook and Freddie are my only friends. And I remember when I was originally watching Skins as a teenager, out of this season, he was my favourite of the boys. I just kind of thought he was cute looks-wise, but also I liked his weird, quirky thing going on. Who knew I'm attracted to other autistic people? Who knew? JJ catches Pandora with Cook in these weird, like, halls. Like, for some reason, this is not really a thing, I don't think, anyway, unless you're going to, like, a boarding school sixth form. But in sixth form, they don't have halls. They don't have halls for students or for staff. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but, like, as far as I know, that's not a thing, except from it's just a helpful plot point for Skins that sometimes when a student has nowhere to go, they've been thrown out of their house, they need to live somewhere, they get thrown in these weird little halls that are like university. And JJ just says to Cook, "Just care." And Cook goes, "About what?" And that's when JJ kind of goes off the rails. "About me. Care about me, you twats." Which, like, this is where a lot of, again, the overlap of similar experiences as an autistic person between Pandora and JJ are, like, mirroring each other, overlapping, is the way that they are feeling in their relationships, pretty much. The ways that they're treated are relatively similar, but not directly, and I think a lot of what comes into play is their gender, because Pandora is pretty much always brushed off by everybody, and the only person, or like the only people who like her, which is something I find interesting and familiar in my own experience, is the weird outcast that nobody likes, Cook, who also doesn't really obey, like, the norms of society, but more in, like, a fuck you, I won't do what you tell me kind of way. Whereas Autistic, so it's kind of like, I don't understand the rules. I'm gonna get cried out. Or people literally from different countries who were probably not brought up with the same social structures as in the UK, or as well as probably did not grow up with English as a first language. Because I describe as well a lot of my experiences of being autistic is I feel like I'm translating from neurotypical language into my autistic language. And I feel like it's a similar feeling and sensation for people who had a different language growing up and then moved to another country that speaks a completely different language. So that's why I think that Pandora and Thomas got along so well, and why Cook seems to also really like the two autistic people of the cast. I also remember seeing people talking about this sort of a stereotype, but kind of real as well, that a lot of the quiet autistic kids in school would be adopted by like a big badass guy or girl who would do the intimidating and beating up of anyone who fucked around with their autistic mate, you know? So it's really great TikTok if I can find it. If I can find it, I will put it here or link it in the description for you. Because it was just such a mood. I don't think I've personally had that experience. I think I've had to be that person for myself. But I just think it's interesting seeing a lot of those autistic stereotypes coming in such an old show. That's why I think this representation is actually really good. Both the on purpose one and the accidental autistic Pandora. After the whole like, care about me you twats, Cook does give him a hug and does validate how he feels and validates him and validates those feelings, whereas Pandora never gets that. Like, Pandora never gets that. I think Cook is as well more willing to be aware that he's doing fucked up shit because he's usually doing fucked up shit on purpose. And I think that with his character, sometimes that leaks into accidentally being fucked up to people he cares about. But then it swiftly moves into JJ is Cook's lookout for when Cook's buying drugs. So luckily they get away unscathed just about. But JJ does then drug Cook with his mad meds to sort of screw him over. Something I noticed about JJ, he's always aware of other people's needs, but then obsessed with the idea that he is socially dysfunctioned, which is something he has been fed. So like, even though he is so hyper aware of the people around him, what they need before they even know they need it, he is still fed so aggressively this idea that he is dysfunctional and it's his fault, his responsibility, that really fucks with him, to be honest, quite a lot. Like, he's so in his head a lot of the time that he doesn't realise that Emily is like literally asking him to get naked and have sex. And my note here said, I mean, I'd be confused too because she's a lesbian and he's a man. So like, you know, it's not super helpful. It's a bit of a confusing moment for an autistic man, you know? Your lesbian friend's like, okay, I will take your virginity for you. Pardon? But it's nice. I think that he lost his virginity in a safe space, his own room, where he's able to let out meltdowns, etc., with a friend and someone who has been kind to him. And you can really see that this has like quite an impact on how he feels about himself. And he's like, I can be quite cute. And like, yeah, it's another one of those side-by-sides between Pandora and JJ is that, you know, Pandora, yeah, lost her virginity to a friend, but was he taking advantage of her a little bit? Probably. Where was it? Yeah, in her home, but it was also like the house was trash after this party had been hijacked by her fucked up friends. I'm not sure if they were even alone in that room as well. I think there were probably people in the room who were unconscious. It wasn't in bed, I think it was on the floor, you know, like, it's not fun, it's not great. And then, yeah, I made a note that JJ is one of the few characters who could actually tell the twins apart. I don't know whether this was the same episode, but basically, yeah, Thomas finds out at some point that Panda cheated. I'm sorry, I haven't actually said that before. Pandora is also known as Panda throughout this show. But basically, something happens where Thomas now knows that Pandora slept with somebody else. So they were broken up for quite a while. So I don't remember what episode this was, but there was a dance at the college, which is also not a thing. My colleges did not have dances. Did anybody else's sixth form have dances? And there's just like a moment where Pandora is dancing with the headmaster. And they're both dancing really badly. And I also had Canon, the headmaster, as autistic, to be honest. If you watch the show, you'll see, you'll understand. She's in like this cute princess dress with space buns. At the dance, Thomas decides to finally approach her and like let them start over again. He's like, hi, I'm Thomas. And that's like really cute moment, blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't really have many more notes after this because the second season is kind of surrounding a death and then much more to do with like Effie again than really anybody else. So those are like my notes. I'm sure I made many, many more notes because in that season as well is when JJ has his whole like first proper relationship with someone who's actually interested in him. I feel like that encompasses the majority of the stuff that happens for these two characters. I think it's also very interesting that they don't really interact very much one-on-one. I think that maybe if they did, that Pandora would have realised she's autistic. I think as well, at the very end of their generation, I think both of them get like a pretty decent ending, I guess, because they don't reoccur in anything else after this. Pandora is actually a secret genius, a secret history buff, and she gets into Harvard. Yeah, Harvard in America on like an amazing scholarship, so she doesn't have to pay for like any of her tuition. Nobody knew, and she just took some extra exams and like just took some entrance exams and just got in. Thomas also got into Harvard as well because he was scouted by, I don't know, some coach. He's a really good runner basically, and he went through a whole load of shit with his experience of trying to get in education. And then yeah, I think JJ gets in wherever he was applying to, but also he's like still happily with his girlfriend whose name I can't fucking remember. But also gonna drop some secret Artie lore. The girl who plays JJ's like girlfriend was in Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, and that was my first ever audition, was for that film. Anyway, end of Artie lore. This is a long video. My back hurts. I need to lay down, as usual. But yeah, if there's any more that you would like me to talk about when it comes to skins, I guess, or autism, ADHD things, I have a bunch of other fun, silly videos that are going on. Let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe, share the video, you know, all those things, good for the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. Helps me. Yeah, I'd really like to reach 1k subscribers by the end of this year, even if I don't reach the watch time for partner or whatever. So subscribe if you would like to see more of like Artie's media analysis vibes that are pretty much always skewed to queer, trans, or ADHD, autistic, or some kind of disability related thing. And that's it for this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.